I'm Jack, an ordinary man living an ordinary life. My wife Sarah and I have been together for 10 years. We never had any big problems, but lately I have started to notice changes. Sarah, who had never been interested in healthy eating or exercise before, suddenly became active in sports. She started running every morning, eating a special diet, and even bought a yoga subscription. At first I thought it was just another hobby, but gradually suspicions began to creep in on me. She was constantly on the phone, corresponding with someone on social networks. When I walked into the room, she would quickly close her laptop or phone. I felt she was hiding something, but I couldn't figure out what. One morning, when Sarah went for her run again, I decided to take care of her laptop. I found him with a password, although we had no secrets from each other before. It was strange. I decided I needed to learn more. That evening, as we sat on the couch, I tried to hint to Sarah that I was noticing a change in her behavior. She laughed and said it was all because of the new regime and that she just wanted to be healthier. But her eyes, they were different. I no longer saw in them the openness that I had known all these years. The next day I woke up earlier than usual and decided to follow her. She got ready for a run, put on a sports uniform, and left the house. I waited a few minutes, then followed her out. At first she just ran along her usual route, but then she turned toward the park, where I noticed her stop. Sarah met a young man in a sports uniform. A cold wave of suspicion washed over me. I crept closer, trying to remain unnoticed. They began to warm up, exchanging smiles and jokes. I saw them glance at each other and noticed something unusual in their interaction. Their physical contact seemed too close for simple training. At one point this guy who seemed to be a massage therapist or trainer, came up to her and started massaging her neck. They laughed and I saw his hands lingering on her body for a long time. It didn't feel like an innocent exercise. I felt the blood rush through my veins. It was the moment when I understood. Something is happening behind my back. I decided not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it's just my jealousy or imagination, but could not leave it like that. I had to find out the truth. I couldn't sleep that night. I decided I had to talk to Sarah. When she got home, I tried to start a conversation, but she was exhausted and wanted to sleep. I felt that if I did not go to the end now, I would lose my chance. Therefore, I decided to take the next step. I told her I wanted to join her for a run the next morning. Her reaction was unexpected. She was confused, but quickly found an excuse that it was her personal time. This only strengthened my suspicions. When she fell asleep, I took her phone and started going through the messages. She always deleted her chat history, but this time she left one message from someone named Michael. He wrote about the meeting in the park and how he can't wait for their next training session together. My heart froze. I couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, when Sarah went out for a run again, I took the car and followed her. This time I decided to find out everything. I followed her to the park and watched her meet the same man. They started hugging, laughing, and I could see his hand going down her back. I decided to act. I got out of the car and walked towards them, trying to stay calm. When they saw me, their faces changed. Sarah paled and Michael looked scared. "What's going on here?" I asked, trying not to show my emotions. Sarah started to say something about how it wasn't what I thought, but I already knew the truth. I knew she had cheated on me, and now I was going to find out how far it went. As I stood before them in the park, feelings of betrayal and anger mingled in my mind. Sarah began to speak, trying to justify herself. "Jack, it's not what you think," she said, wringing her hands together nervously. Her eyes avoided mine, which only confirmed my worst fears. "Not what I think?" I couldn't hold back any longer. "Then why are you holding hands? Why is he touching you like no one else is allowed to?" Michael was silent, looking increasingly nervous. He tried to say something, but I stopped him. "Shut up," I told him, my face as cold as ice. "I want to hear it from her." Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Jack, it's not that. We're just friends, nothing more." "Just friends? That's not what friendship looks like," I replied, not taking my eyes off her. "What's really going on, Sarah? Tell me the truth." She covered her face with her hands as if trying to protect herself from my words. But I had already seen all that was needed. I felt something inside me break, like an old clock that would no longer run. "I'm going home," I said, turning away from them. You can stay here if you want, but when you get home, we'll talk. I didn't wait for an answer and walked to my car, feeling the ground literally slide under my feet. The road home was blurry. I couldn't concentrate. All my thoughts revolved around one question. How could she do this to me? I felt humiliated, angry, but most of all, broken. How did I not notice this before? How long did it last? When I got home, I decided I wasn't going to wait. I started looking for more evidence. I started with her laptop. This time I decided to use all my determination to crack the password. After a few tries, I finally found the right combination. My mind was not yet ready for what I saw. Many messages from Michael appeared on the screen. They wrote to each other almost every day, exchanging candid words and photos that I could never have imagined. It was painful to read. Every word hit straight to the heart. It was not just a betrayal. It was a real, deep love affair. They shared things they didn't share with me. I closed my laptop, feeling my head spin. I could no longer stay in this house filled with lies and betrayal. I went outside to get some fresh air, trying to collect my thoughts. Just then I noticed Michael's car parked nearby. He seems to have been waiting for Sarah. Anger boiled up in me like a volcano. I decided it was time to find out once and for all. I went to his car, opened the door decisively, and saw him with the phone in his hand. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not hiding my fury. Michael looked up and I saw fear in his eyes. I I was just waiting for Sarah. We need to talk. Speak. I could barely hold back. You've talked enough. I know everything. Now you tell me the truth or I'll make you. Michael looked like he was about to pass out. He was silent for a few seconds before finally speaking. Okay. We've been seeing each other for a few months now. We got close during training and it just kind of happened. By itself, I asked, feeling myself being torn apart. Now what? What are you going to do? He was silent, not knowing what to say. His silence spoke louder than words. At that moment, I realized that this betrayal was not an accident or a mistake. It was something deeper, something that could not be fixed. I came home feeling like a ghost. Sarah was already waiting for me in the living room. She looked devastated, but I couldn't sympathize with her anymore. "We need to talk," she said, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No," I said firmly. "Now I will speak. I know everything, Sarah. I saw the messages. I know about your meetings with him. You betrayed me. You betrayed us." She began to cry, but her tears no longer moved me. "Jack, please let me explain." "What is there to explain?" I interrupted her. "You ruined everything. Now I just want to know one thing. Are you in love with him?" She was silent, and that silence was the answer. I felt everything inside me go cold. "Okay," I said, trying to hold back my emotions. "Then we have to decide what to do next. I can't live with a lie anymore." Sarah didn't answer. She just looked at me, and I could see fear and remorse in her eyes. But it wasn't enough for me. I knew we were in for a long conversation, and I had to prepare for the worst. We sat across from each other in the living room. Silence filled the space between us, but it was not peaceful. It was a tense silence, like before a storm. Sarah's tears dried up, leaving traces of betrayal and remorse on her face. I didn't know what to expect from this conversation, but I knew one thing. I had to hear the truth, no matter how bitter it was. "Sarah," I began, trying to keep my voice level, even though my chest was boiling. "I want to know everything. No lies, no excuses. How did it start?" She looked away as if trying to find answers on the floor, but I wasn't going to wait forever. "If you want me to give you even a chance, you have to be honest now," I added, raising my tone. Sarah exhaled as if deciding on something difficult. "Okay," she finally said. "It started a few months ago. I started jogging in the morning to keep fit, and one day I met Michael. He was very nice, and we started talking. At first, it was just about training, about health, but then everything has somehow changed." "Has it changed?" I asked. "What does that mean, Sarah? How can you just change your heart?" "I don't know." Her voice began to shake. "I didn't mean to, Jack. I really didn't. But he started showing me attention that I hadn't felt from you in a long time." Those words hit me harder than any physical blow. "From me? Are you saying it's my fault?" No, that's not what I mean." she answered quickly, wiping away her tears. But you and I haven't really talked for a long time. We haven't shared our feelings. We live like two neighbors under the same roof. Not as a couple. I felt my face burn with anger. And you decided to solve it by betraying me. Sarah, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you tell me you were missing something? I was afraid, she whispered. I was afraid that you wouldn't understand, that you would just laugh or say that I was making up problems. And Michael, he listened to me. He understood me. For the first time in all this time, I felt my heart begin to grow cold. It wasn't just physical betrayal. She betrayed us on an emotional level. She opened up to another man in a way she hadn't done with me in a long time. How far did it go? I asked, tensing every muscle in my body as if preparing for the worst blow. Sarah fell silent again. Her hands were shaking and I could see her gather herself before answering. We met a few times at the park, and then one day I went to his house. I heard the ground split apart under my feet. And what happened at his house? I almost whispered because I couldn't stand the pain anymore. We slept together, she finally admitted, her voice breaking and tears streaming down her cheeks again. It was one time, Jack, I swear. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. This news destroyed me. I felt the world around me begin to darken, as if clouds were gathering overhead. I couldn't listen anymore. Getting up from the sofa, I went to the kitchen, trying to collect my thoughts. Took a glass of water, but my hands were shaking so much I couldn't hold it. Jack, please, she began, following me. I know I was wrong. I know it was terrible, but I still love you. I want to make it right. I turned to her, and for the first time in all this time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Do you think everything can be fixed? I asked, almost smiling with desperation. How can you fix this, Sarah? You ruined everything we had. I know, she replied, crying again. I want to try. Maybe we can go to a counselor. Try again. Consultant? I interrupted. You think some counselor can change what you did? What do I know now? Her silence was the only answer. And at that moment, I realized that this conversation no longer made sense. She made her choice, and I had to make mine. I want you to leave this house, I said, trying not to meet her eyes. I can't look at you anymore. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I do know one thing. We can't go on like this. Sarah staggered as if from a blow, but did not object. She simply nodded as if accepting her punishment. Okay, she said quietly. I'm going to stay with my mother for a few days. Maybe it'll be better for both of us. I watched her pack, feeling my chest ache as if my heart was being ripped apart. When she left the house, I was left standing alone in silence, looking at the empty walls of our house. My head was filled with thousands of thoughts, but one was the strongest. What should I do next? Should we forgive? Try to build everything anew? Or is it better to leave the past behind and start a new life? But one thing I knew for sure, this was not the last chapter of our story. A few days have passed since Sarah went to see her mother. My home, once filled with her laughter and warmth, was now empty and cold. I tried to find some solace in my usual routine, but everything felt wrong, incomplete. I couldn't stop thinking about her, what she had done, what we had lost. Every time I tried to focus on work or something else, the memory brought me back to that conversation in the living room. My thoughts seemed to be fixed on this moment, when she admitted that she had betrayed me. I wanted to put it out of my head, but I couldn't. I needed answers. I had to find out how far it went. One evening, when the silence became unbearable, I decided to act. I knew I would not rest until I had the whole truth. I picked up the phone and called her best friend, Megan. She was the one who knew Sarah best and could perhaps shed some light on what had happened. Hi, Megan, I said as she picked up the phone. This is Jack. Jack? Her voice sounded surprised. How are you? Not really, I admitted. I need to talk to you about Sarah. I heard her sigh, and there was silence for a moment. I heard what happened, she finally said. Sarah told me a little. What exactly was she telling you? I asked, trying to hide my impatience. She said you had problems, that you drifted apart, Megan replied, and that she started seeing Michael. I tried to dissuade her, Jack, honestly. I told her it wasn't a solution, but she was so confused. Confused? I felt my heart tighten. And you knew about all this? I knew she was seeing him, she admitted, but I didn't know it had gotten this far until she called me after you saw them. She was in a panic, said it was over, that she lost you. I felt anger wash over me again. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Megan? I couldn't, Jack, she answered desperately. Sarah is my friend. I wanted to help her, but I didn't know how. And now, I don't know what to say. I closed my eyes trying to calm down. Okay, thanks for being honest, Megan. If you find out anything else, please let me know. Of course, she replied. I sincerely hope you can somehow manage this. When I hung up, I felt even more confused. The feeling of betrayal and sadness dragged me down like a stone, dragged to the bottom of the ocean. But I realized that now I need to act more decisively. I decided to find out more about Michael. I had his phone number that I found in Sarah's phone. I made up my mind and decided to call him. A few rings and he picked up the phone. Hello? Came his voice, a little nervous. Michael, this is Jack, I said, wasting no time. There was a silence that lasted forever. Jack, I don't know what to say, he finally answered. Then listen, I interrupted. I need the truth. How long has it been going on between you and Sarah? He sighed and I heard him breathing heavily. It's been a few months, he admitted. We met at training and started talking. At first it was just friendship, but then everything changed. And how dare you cross the line, I asked, trying to control my rage. We just felt something for each other, he said, his voice shaking. I didn't mean it, Jack. I really did. But she was unhappy and so was I. And you thought the best way to solve this was to destroy my family? I could feel the anger starting to wash over me. No, I didn't think of it that way, he answered quickly. I was blind. I'm sorry. Do you know what you did? I tried to hold myself in my hands, but my voice broke. You tore our family apart. I know, he said quietly. I'm sorry about it, Jack, I really am. If there's anything I can do to make it right. You've already done enough, I replied, and felt tears begin to form in my eyes. I don't need anything else from you. I hung up the phone, and even though I learned more, I felt even more devastated. How could you be so wrong about a person with whom you lived for so many years? How was it possible not to notice the signs, not to feel that she was moving away? But now I knew what I had to do. I decided I wanted to talk to Sarah again, but this time it would be different. I didn't want to listen to her excuses. I wanted to know why she decided to take such a step and what she planned to do next. The next day I called her. Sarah, we have to meet, I said, trying to sound calm. Okay, she replied. Where and when? Come home tonight, I said. We will discuss everything. As evening came, I could feel a storm brewing inside me. Sarah came in looking exhausted and tearful. She sat down on the sofa where we were sitting last time and looked at me with eyes full of fear and hope. Jack, I know I was wrong, she began, but I raised my hand to stop her. I'll talk this time, I said firmly. I want to know what you're thinking of doing next. Is there any chance we can make things right, or have you already made up your mind? She was silent, thinking over my words, and suddenly her phone started ringing. She pulled it out of her pocket, and Michael's name appeared on the screen. She turned pale, quickly turned off the call, and looked at me as if caught in the act. Who is it? I asked, even though I knew the answer. It's nothing, she muttered, trying to hide the fear in her voice. But I saw his name, I said, my voice cold as ice. It's Michael, isn't it? Sarah didn't know what to say. She realized that all her excuses were falling apart in front of me. I felt the anger wash over me again. Are you still with him? Are you still talking to him? She could not answer, but her silence was enough. I realized that maybe we had come too far to turn back. Sarah sat in front of me, looking at the floor as if searching for answers. Her phone call, which she tried to hide, shattered all my hopes that there could still be trust between us. I could see how her hands were shaking, and I knew that she was also struggling inside. You're still with him, right? I repeated my question, trying to remain calm, but feeling anger wash over me in waves. Jack, it's not what you think, she finally said, looking up. I'm trying to finish everything, but he won't let me go. I looked at her in surprise. He won't let you go? I asked. What does that mean, Sarah? You're a grown man. If you want to stop, just stop. She sighed, and I saw tears in her eyes. I know, she said quietly. But it just got so confusing. Michael, he's done so much for me. He's been there when I've had a hard time. I'm not making excuses, but it was more than just physical attraction. More? I felt my heart tighten. Are you saying you fell in love with him? She didn't answer, but her silence spoke louder than any words. I realized that she was really confused about her feelings, and this thought hurt more than anything. She betrayed me not only with her body, but also with her heart. Sarah, I began, struggling to find the right words. I can't make you stay if you don't want to, but I want to know if you have even the slightest doubt about what you've done. She looked up at me and I saw real pain in them. Of course there is, she said quietly. I regret it every day. I never meant to hurt you, Jack. You were everything to me, but... But what? I interrupted her. Why didn't you talk to me before you took this step? Why didn't you give us a chance to solve our problems together? I don't know, she admitted. I was scared. I felt like we were drifting apart, and Michael was there when I needed someone the most. I know that's not an excuse, but it's my truth. I sighed as I felt my anger slowly dissolve, leaving only the pain behind. Okay, I said after a long pause. I'm willing to try to give us another chance, but that means we have to deal with this together. You have to cut off all contact with Michael. Completely. Sarah nodded, though she looked hesitant. I'll try, she said, but he's not one to back down easily. He might try to contact me again. Then you must be strong, I replied. If you want us to have a chance, you have to choose me over him. Understood? She nodded again, a faint smile appearing on her face. Yes, I understand. I choose you, Jack. I choose us. For a moment, I felt hope blossom again in my heart. Maybe we really can get through this and come out stronger. But I knew it would be a tough road, and we would both have to walk it together. The next few days were not easy. Sarah tried to stay away from the phone and avoid any contact with Michael, but I could see how hard it was for her. She was nervous, as if she was waiting for something inevitable. And this something happened on the 5th day after our conversation. That evening, I was sitting in the living room reading a book when I heard her phone ring again. Sarah quickly pulled it out of her pocket and looked at the screen. I saw her face turn pale and realized it was Michael again. You have to answer him and tell him this is the end, I said, trying to stay calm. She nodded and pressed the answer button. Michael, I can't talk to you anymore, she said firmly. This is the end. We have to stop this once and for all. I could see her hands shaking as she said those words, and I heard Michael answer something on the phone, but I couldn't make out what it was. Then suddenly her face changed. She looked scared and I knew something was wrong. What did he say? I asked, coming closer. He said that if I don't talk to him in person, he'll come here, she replied, her voice trembling with fear. Is he threatening you? I felt my anger begin to boil again. I don't know, she said, wiping the tears from her face, but he sounded very serious. I realized that this could become a problem. If Michael really decided to go to extremes, we could be in danger. Okay, I said, trying to control myself. If he comes here, we have to be ready. I won't let him bother us anymore. Sarah nodded, but I could tell she was afraid, and I knew it was going to be a rough night. Michael was unpredictable, and I couldn't be sure what he would do next. But I decided that this time we would be ready for anything. We sat in the kitchen, waiting for the night to reveal its cards. Every sound outside the window made me tense up. I knew Michael could show up at any minute, and suddenly, around midnight, I heard the sound of a car stopping in front of our house. I went to the window and saw Michael getting out of the car. He looked angry, as if preparing for a confrontation. I pulled myself together and opened the door, walking out to meet him. What are you doing here, Michael? I asked, trying to sound calm but determined. I want to talk to Sarah, he replied as he approached the door. She told you it was the end, I said, standing in the doorway. You have to go. But he was not going to back down. No, I'm not leaving until I talk to her, he insisted, anger filling his voice. I know she loves me. Love! I barely restrained myself from breaking down. She chose me, Michael. This is the end. Go away. What if I don't go? He asked, taking a step closer. I could see the determination in his eyes, and I knew he wasn't going to stop just like that. Then you will make me protect my family, I replied coldly. I'm not afraid of you, Michael. He paused for a moment, thinking, then suddenly lunged forward. But I was ready. I pushed him back and grabbed him by the collar, pinning him against the wall. This is your last chance to get out of here peacefully, I whispered, looking him straight in the eye. He was panting, trying to free himself, but I wasn't giving him a chance. And suddenly his face changed. He saw something in my eyes that made him stop. Okay, he finally said, backing away slowly. I'll go, but it's not the end. It's the end for you, I replied, not taking my eyes off him. Go and never come back. Michael slowly walked away, returned to his car, and drove off. I stood in the doorway looking after him and felt the tension in my body gradually disappear. I knew this wasn't the last time we would see him, but for the moment we were safe. I returned to the house to find Sarah sitting in the kitchen, tears welling up in her eyes. I walked up to her and hugged her, feeling her body shake with fear. It's okay, I whispered, stroking her head. We'll get through this, together. Sarah and I spent the next few weeks trying to rebuild our relationship. We decided to visit a marriage counselor to find ways to overcome the crisis. It was difficult. Each session brought with it new emotions, old resentments, and even more questions. But we tried. We wanted to save our marriage. Michael did not appear in front of our house anymore, and Sarah did not receive any calls from him. It seemed that he finally understood that it was over. But even so, I couldn't quite shake the feeling that something still remained unresolved. One evening, as Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table, I decided to share my thoughts. Sarah, I began, feeling my heart sink. I want to know if you're really ready to end this whole thing with Michael. Do you really want to be with me? She looked at me, her eyes filled with pain and fatigue. Jack, I already told you. I want to make things right. I want us to be happy. I understand, I replied. But do you still have feelings for him? I want to know the truth. She paused for a moment before answering. I don't know, she admitted quietly. It's hard for me to say. He was important to me, and it won't just go away. But I want to try to rebuild everything with you. Those words hurt. I understood that you couldn't demand that her feelings just go away, but knowing that she hadn't completely given up on him was hard. Okay, I said after a pause, but I need more from you. I need reassurance that you're not going back to him. She nodded, and I could see her trying to hold back tears. I'll try, Jack. I really will. The next few days passed in relative peace. We continued to attend counseling sessions and tried to find new ways to communicate with each other, but the shadow of doubt continued to hang between us. I could see Sarah trying to stay away from the phone and spend more time with me, but sometimes her gaze would go blank, and I could tell that her thoughts were somewhere far away. One day on my way home from work, I decided to surprise her. I bought her favorite flowers and brought a bottle of wine to spend the evening together and try to bring some romance back into our relationship. When I got to the house, I saw that the door was half open. I felt my heart tighten in my chest. Carefully went inside, trying not to make any sound. It was quiet in the corridor, but I heard some sound from the kitchen. I got closer and saw Sarah standing by the window with her phone in her hands. Her face was tense and her gaze focused. I stopped in the doorway, trying to figure out what was going on. She didn't notice me. She was looking at the phone screen, and I realized that she was going through the messages. My heart beat faster when I saw the name on the screen. It was a message from Michael. Sarah, I said softly, but loud enough for her to hear. She quickly looked away from the phone and looked at me like she was caught in the act. Her face turned pale, and she dropped the phone on the floor. Jack, it's not what you think, she said, her voice shaking. Not what I think? I came closer, trying to control the anger that boiled inside me. Are you still in touch with him? No, she quickly countered, picking up the phone. That was the last message he sent. I was going to delete it. Remove? I repeated, anger filling my voice. Sarah, you promised me you would stop all contact with him. Why are you keeping his messages? She paused for a moment, trying to come up with an excuse. I just couldn't. I don't know why, Jack. I wanted to do it, but something stopped me. I could see she was struggling with her feelings, but I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. Sarah, this can't go on forever, I said, feeling tears begin to form in my eyes. I can't go on living like this. You have to make a decision. She began to cry, lowering her head. I know, Jack. I know I made it up, but I can't just forget him. I need time. Time? I felt my patience running out. We've been trying to figure this out for so long, and you always say the same thing. How much longer do you need to figure out who you really want? She was silent, and I realized that she could not answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I realized that she might never be able to choose me over Michael. Okay, I finally said, trying to hold back my emotions. I'm giving you one more chance. The last one. You must cut off all contact with him once and for all. Otherwise, we can't go on. She nodded, tears running down her cheeks. I'll try, Jack. I really will. I felt that I could no longer stay in this house. I'll get some fresh air, I said, trying to calm myself down. I need to think. I went outside, leaving her there, alone with her thoughts. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if we could fix everything. But I did know one thing. I couldn't live in uncertainty anymore. We needed clarity, and we had to find it. As I stood outside looking up at the stars, I felt my phone ring. It was an unknown number. I picked up the phone not knowing what to expect. Jack? Michael's voice was heard. I shuddered when I heard his voice. We need to meet. There's something you need to know. I paused for a moment, weighing my options. Okay, I finally said. Where and when? Tomorrow night at the cafe on the corner of your street, he replied. It's important. I hung up, feeling a sense of uncertainty wash over me again. What could he tell me? And can it change everything? The next evening, I felt every step I took echoing heavily in my chest. The small cafe on the corner of the street seemed cold and deserted. There were a few patrons inside, but my eyes immediately found Michael sitting at a corner table, nervously clutching a cup of coffee. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down, and walked over to him. Hey, Jack, he said, as I sat across from him. His voice was low and strained. Hello, I replied, trying to keep my cool. What do you want to tell me? He fell silent for a moment, as if collecting his spirit. I know you don't want to listen to me, he began, but there's something you should know about Sarah and me. I frowned, feeling suspicion rise in me. What exactly? Michael looked me straight in the eyes, and I saw a strange determination in his eyes. Sarah hasn't told you everything, he said. What happened between us? It wasn't just betrayal. It was something more. I felt my heart sink. What do you mean? I think she loves me, he admitted. We talked about being together, about starting a new life. These words hit me like a hammer. And what has changed? I asked, barely holding back my anger. Why are you here now, telling me all this? He exhaled, trying to collect his thoughts. Because I realized we can't be together. She still thinks about you. She always comes back to you, even when we're together. I thought I could take her away, but I was wrong. I could feel my senses mixing in a kaleidoscope of emotions. And you think I should thank you for this information? No, he replied. I don't want you to think that I'm here to justify myself. I just want you to know that I'm letting her go. And I want you to know that she can come back to you, but she won't be happy until he decides what he really wants. I sat in silence, pondering his words. I knew he was right. Sarah had to make a choice, and I couldn't make her do it. I should have let her make her own decision. There's one more thing you should know, Michael said, leaning in closer. She told me she would never be happy without you. Even when we were together, she talked about you. The words hit me again, this time in a different way. They gave me hope, but they also confused me even more. I didn't know what to do with this information. What do you suggest? I finally asked. Give her time, he replied. Give her a chance to understand what she really wants. And if she chooses you, then you must be ready to forgive. I nodded, realizing he was right. If I want to save our marriage, I have to give her a chance to make the right choice. Thank you, I finally said, standing up. I don't know what's next, but I'll try to do my best. Michael nodded. Me too, he said. I'll get out of her life to give you both a chance. I walked out of the cafe feeling a sense of anxiety growing inside me. I knew we had a tough road ahead of us, but now I had some clarity. I had to give Sarah space and time to decide what was really important to her. When I got home, I found Sarah waiting for me in the living room. Her face was tense, and her eyes looked red from tears. She obviously knew where I was and who I was talking to. "Have you met Michael?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes," I answered honestly. "He told me something important, and now I want to hear it from you." She paused for a moment and then nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Ask what you want." "Do you still love him?" I asked, looking straight into her eyes. She looked confused, like she didn't know what to say. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "I'm confused, Jack. I know I hurt you, and I regret it every day. But I can't say I don't still have feelings for him either." I felt something break inside me. "Okay," I said, trying to stay calm. "But you have to make a choice, Sarah. We can't go on living like this." She nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes. "I know," she said quietly. "I promise you, I'll do my best to find an answer. But I need time." I realized that I couldn't put any more pressure on her. I had to give her the opportunity to find herself, to understand what is really important to her. "Okay," I finally said. "I'll give you time, but know that I have my limits too." She nodded again and I saw her face change. "Thanks, Jack," she said, trying to smile. "I don't know what's next, but I'm grateful that you're willing to try." We spent the rest of the evening in silence, each deep in his own thoughts. I knew we had a tough road ahead of us, and I wasn't sure if we could get through it together. But one thing I knew for sure, we had to try. As night fell on our city, I lay in bed next to Sarah, feeling the weight of our problems hanging in the air. I closed my eyes, praying that the next day would bring us some hope. But deep inside, I knew that this battle was far from over. The next few days passed like a blur. Sarah and I tried to act as if nothing had happened, but the atmosphere in the house was as tense as a taut string. I could see her trying to find her thoughts, her gaze often becoming distant as she thought. I also tried not to show my feelings, but the truth was that every moment seemed like a test to me. We decided to take a break from our marriage therapist sessions to give each other some space. Sarah spent more time with friends, and I tried to find solace in work and sports. But every time I went home, I felt Michael's shadow still hanging over us. One evening, after Sarah got home from meeting friends, I decided it was time to have a frank conversation. "We need to talk," I said, as she walked into the living room. She looked at me. It was obvious that she was tired, but she agreed. "Yeah, I think we need to talk too." We sat down at the kitchen table, and I felt my heart begin to pound. "Sarah," I began, gathering all my thoughts together, "I gave you time to think, and now I want to know what you've decided." She looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness and uncertainty. "I don't know, Jack," she answered quietly. "I really don't know. I'm still confused." I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. "You can't keep saying you don't know," I said, trying to stay calm. "You have to make a choice. You can't keep us both in limbo." Sarah fell silent, and I could see her struggling with herself. "I know," she finally said, "but it's not that simple. I have feelings for you, and I have feelings for him. I can't just turn them off." "It's not a matter of turning off the senses," I replied. "It's a matter of making a decision. You have to figure out who you really want next to you. Who do you choose?" She paused for a moment, then said softly, "I want you, Jack. I really do. But I don't know if I can just give up on Michael. He's been a part of my life." These words pierced me like a knife. "Then maybe we should break up," I said, trying to hold back tears. "If you can't choose between us, then maybe you're better off with him." Sarah turned pale and I could see her lips begin to tremble. "Jack, please don't say that," she begged, tears filling her eyes. "I don't want to lose you. I just, I just don't know how to." "You have to find a way," I replied firmly, "because I can't live like this anymore. I can't live with this doubt." She cried again and I felt my heart sink. I didn't want to lose her, but I also couldn't continue living in the shadow of her indecision. I realized that we had reached a critical point. "Okay," she finally said, wiping the tears from her face. "I will try to make a choice, but I need more time." I sighed, feeling the tension ease a bit. "Okay," I said. "I'll give you a little more time, but know that I can't wait forever." She nodded and I saw her face fill with determination again. "Thank you, Jack," she said quietly. "I promise I'll do my best to figure out what I want." The next day we decided to spend the day separately. Sarah went to her mom's to spend time with her family, and I decided to go for a walk to clear my mind. After a few hours of driving, I stopped at a lake where Sarah and I used to spend time together. It was a place that was once ours, a place where we shared our dreams and plans for the future. Sitting on the shore, I tried to find answers to my questions. Will I be able to forgive her completely if she chooses me? Will I be able to let go of the anger and pain caused by her betrayal? And most importantly, will I be able to trust her again? My thoughts were interrupted when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I picked up the phone not knowing what to expect. "Hello, Jack?" An unfamiliar female voice was heard. "This is Laura, Michael's mom." I shuddered in surprise. "Yes, listening," I said, trying to understand why she was calling me. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she continued, her voice sounding alarmed. "But I want you to know, Michael was in an accident. He's in the hospital right now." I felt a cold sweat run down my back. "What happened?" I asked, trying to collect my thoughts. "He was driving home when the collision happened. He is in a stable condition, but in a coma," she said. I thought Sarah would want to know. She was very important to him. I didn't know what to say. The words froze in my throat. "Thanks for letting me know," I finally said. "I will pass that information on to her." After hanging up, I felt everything around me begin to spin. This news could change everything. How do I tell Sarah this? How will she react? When I got home, Sarah was already waiting for me. Her face was worried, and I could tell she felt something was wrong. "What's wrong, Jack?" she asked as I walked into the living room. I could feel my heart sinking, but I knew I couldn't hide it from her. "It's about Michael," I began, struggling to find the right words. "He was in an accident. His mom called me. He's in the hospital, in a coma." Her face turned pale and she shivered as if from cold. "Oh God," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I must see him." I knew she would say that, and although I understood her desire, I felt jealousy reawakening in my heart. "Sarah," I said carefully, "you need to think about this. You said you wanted to stay with me, and now—" "I know," she interrupted, her voice filled with pain. "But I can't just leave him. He's been a part of my life. I have to see him." I sighed, realizing that it was useless to argue with her. "Okay," I said, "but know that there will be consequences. If you go to him, we may not be able to rekindle our relationship." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "I know," she answered quietly, "but I have to do it." I watched as she packed her things in preparation for the trip to the hospital. My heart ached, but I knew I couldn't stop her. She had to make her choice. As she walked out the door, I was left standing in the empty house, feeling the weight of the situation weighing on me. I knew that our relationship would never be the same, but I also knew that I still loved her. And now it remained only to wait how the events would unfold. I sat on the sofa, staring at the wall, and I knew that this night was going to be a long one. The future was unknown, and I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew one thing for sure. We were on the threshold of changes, and these changes were inevitable. When Sarah came home late at night, I already knew this moment was coming. All this time, while she was in the hospital with Michael, I could feel hope slowly disappearing. I didn't know exactly how she felt, but it was hard not to think that she might choose him over me. She walked into the living room where I was sitting, and our eyes met. Her face looked tired and tearful, and I could tell that she too had had a hard day. "How is he?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "He's still in a coma," she replied, sitting down across from me. "The doctors can't say when he will wake up or if he will wake up at all." I nodded, unsure of what to say. The silence between us was heavy as a stone. "Jack," she began after a long pause, her voice shaky but determined. "I thought a lot today. I realize that I love you. I want to stay with you." I looked at her, trying to understand her words. "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling a wave of emotion rise inside me. "Is it just the fear of losing everything we had?" She sighed and looked straight into my eyes. "I know our relationship wasn't easy, and I made a lot of mistakes," she said. "But I realized that Michael was a distraction. I really want to be with you. I'm ready to work on our relationship." I heard her words, but something inside me kept me from letting go. After all that had happened, I could no longer be sure of her feelings. "Sarah," I began, choosing my words carefully, "you say you want to stay with me, but what happens when he wakes up? Can you leave him in the past?" She fell silent, and I could see her face tense up. I don't know, she admitted. I want to try, but I can't promise it will be easy. I felt my heart sink. I can't live in this uncertainty anymore, I said, trying to stay calm. I can no longer trust you completely, and without trust, we have no future. Sarah held her breath as if she had been hit. Are you saying we can't be together? She asked, her voice shaking with tears. I looked away, trying to control my emotions. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I know I can't go on like this. If you can't give him up completely, then maybe we should break up. She held back the tears that began to flow down her face. Jack, I'm begging you, she begged, her voice filled with desperation. Give us another chance. I'll do my best to make things right. I looked at her and felt my heart sink. I wanted to believe her, but deep down I knew it wouldn't be possible. I don't think I can, I said quietly. Not after everything that happened. She cried again, and I could see her body shaking with emotion. Please, she repeated, but I could feel that my mind had already made up its mind. Sarah, I said softly but firmly, I think we need to break up. You need to find yourself, figure out what you really want, and I can't wait and hope anymore. She fell silent, her eyes filled with despair. She knew that my words were final and that we were parting ways. She got up from her chair, her face was pale and sad. I see, she whispered. I've caused you so much pain. Maybe you're right. Maybe we should go our separate ways. She slowly turned and went to her room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I felt the weight of the situation weighing on my shoulders, but I also knew that this decision was the right one. It was the end of one chapter of our lives and the beginning of a new one. And even though I didn't know what the future would bring, I knew that this choice would give us both a chance to find ourselves and maybe someday find happiness again.